Welcome to Professor Grunsplatter's Spookatorium. I am your curator, Professor Gruntsplatter. Beyond these doors crouch the wonders, horrors, and wry smiles of an uncanny world. This world, your world. Should you choose to come inside, the sounds and stories that the shadows tell will be yours to behold. Make no mistake, it is a place of questions, not answers. A place where the tickle in your belly or the twitch in your eye simply mean you're paying attention. But then if you weren't curious, you wouldn't be here. There will be no refunds once you enter. Thank you for your attention, and the brave ones, come with me. Greetings, this is episode 53 of the Spookatorium. This week marks the 1 year anniversary since I flicked away the bugs, dusted off the cobwebs, and reanimated the show. I wasn't sure then how long I would be able to maintain it, but I knew if I was going to do it, I needed to try and stick to a schedule, and with the exception of a short break I took in, March, I've managed to do that. So I still don't know how long I'll be able to maintain it, but we are here today. The show opened with Scorn, and the track Rained on Her Birthday from the Refuse Start Fires release on Ohm Resistance that came out in 2010. Following that was Fragile Body with Siren off the debut release Unwell, which is really quite good, and that just recently came out on Annihilus. I almost decided to do a metal show today, and then I thought about doing a punk show. I've also considered just a dark folk murder ballad type episode at some point, and then I wondered if those would pose a problem for the copyright crawler that probes the YouTube version of the show that I put up, and so I don't know quite what kind of show this will be. Maybe all of the above, maybe what you are accustomed to, and maybe I will just play kazoo for the last half hour. Coming up in a bit, we are going to look at the concept of the dweller on the threshold. First, though, this is Lithivm with Distortion Cell. That set started with Lithivm with the track Distortion Cell. Following that was Marax with Euphoria Recedes from the 2020 release A Bright Red Scream. And the last thing you heard was a project called Dweller on the Threshold, and that was off the Release Your Mind comp. And the track is Rape of the Natural World. As the candles flicker over sigils and arcane tomes, let us peer into the shadowed corners where esoteric knowledge blooms. The phrase dweller on the threshold is something that has lingered in the back of my head for a long time. I think part of me was conflating it with the 1945 book The Lurker at the Threshold, written by August Derleth, that was spawned from fragments of H.P. Lovecraft's writing that Derleth completed after Lovecraft died. There's also a novella called The Dweller on the Threshold from 1911 by Robert Hitchens. It could be that I've had that compilation from which the track I just played since about 1995, and the band name just stuck in my craw. There's a Van Morrison song of the same name that I'm sure I've bumped up against at times in my life, and Mandible Chatter has a track with that name as well that I would have played if I hadn't just played something from them a few weeks ago. And it is a fundamental undercurrent in Twin Peaks. It's an evocative image, the dweller on the threshold. Aside from letting my imagination sort of decide what that was, I never thought that deeply about it, but as with everything, there is a story. Some of you probably know this better than I do, but the rest of you, if you have thought about it at all, probably thought about it within the playground of your own imagination, as I did. Looking for something to do for this show, I was flipping through one of my books, and that phrase popped out at me. The Dictionary of Mysticism and the Occult describes the dweller on the threshold as, quote, the concept of a hostile spirit representing the accumulated bad karma of an occultist appearing to that person on the astral plane as a force to overcome, unquote. They trace the idea back to the 1842 novel Zanoni by Sir Edward Bulwer-Lytton. A more recent pressing of the book subtitles it A Rosicrucian Tale. Bulwer-Lytton himself was a Rosicrucian and a member of Parliament, as well as a highly regarded author and scholar throughout England and Europe. He said of Zanoni it was, quote, a truth for those who can comprehend it and an extravagance for those who cannot, unquote. The novel is divided into 7 parts, said to indicate the 7-fold path of spiritual development. Dweller on the Threshold is the 4th section and is said to reveal esoteric facts and experience. The story itself revolves around an immortal sacrificing his immortality after falling in love with a mortal woman, and thematically it looks at ideas of the head versus the heart. You may also recognize the little theme that I have an affection for. He was another positioned person with a deep interest in the occult. Madame Blavatsky and the Theosophical Society viewed the concept this way, quote, dweller is an occult term used by students for long ages past and refers to a certain maleficent astral doubles of defunct persons, unquote. In another instance from the Theosophical text, it takes on the idea as a sort of discarded version of the self that lingers out of an attraction or temptation to the new version of the self, that they break down like this, quote, in rare cases, however, something far more dreadful may happen, when the lower manas, which is a theosophy term for the intellectual ability to think, is doomed to exhaust itself by starvation, there is no longer hope that even a remnant of a lower light will, owing to favorable conditions, say even a short period of spiritual aspiration and repentance, attract back to itself its parent ego, when karma leads the higher ego back to new incarnations. In this case, the kama manasic, which they refer to the psychic or passionless emotion state, the karma monastic spook may become that which we call in occultism the dweller on the threshold. This dweller is not like that which is described so graphically in Zanoni, but an actual fact in nature and not a fiction in romance. However beautiful the latter may be, Bulmer must have got the idea from some Eastern initiate. Here again, the Eastern initiate is likely a reference to the Himalayan spirits that Blavatsky claims to have been in communication with. Our dweller, led by affinity and attraction, forces itself into the astral current and through the auric envelope of the new tabernacle inherited by the parent ego, and declares war on the lower light which has replaced it. This, of course, can only happen in the case of moral weakness of the personality so obsessed. No one strong in his virtue and righteous in his walk of life can risk or dread any such thing, but only those depraved in heart." Unquote. Seeing how this surfaced in popular culture was interesting put in that context. In Twin Peaks, the idea is attributed to the Nez Perce tribe, and the shadow self at the Black Lodge was the incarnation of the idea. The dweller on the threshold represented a person's negative and unresolved qualities at the time of death that must be confronted as a final test before reaching perfection. Lynch's adherence to Eastern philosophy and meditation is well established, and thus this tracks with who he is, but among all the ecstatic strangeness that Twin Peaks brought to network primetime television, this is just another delicious milepost. Talapragada Subbaroguru, a Brahmin who also later joined the Theosophical Society, drew comparisons to the battle described in the Bhagavad Gita. Quote, "Philosophically, it is the great battle in which the human spirit has to fight against the lower passions in the physical body. Many of our readers have probably heard about the so-called dweller on the threshold, so vividly described in Leighton's novel Zanoni. According to this author's description, the dweller on the threshold seems to be some elemental, or some other monster of mysterious form, appearing before the neophyte just as he is about to enter the mysterious land, and attempting to shake his resolution with menaces of unknown dangers if he is not fully prepared. There is no such monster in reality. The description must be taken in a figurative sense, but nevertheless there is a dweller on the threshold, whose influence on the mental plane is far more trying than any physical terror can be. The real dweller on the threshold is formed of the despair and despondency of the neophyte, who is called upon to give up all of his old affections for kindred, parents, and children, as well as his aspiration for objects of worldly ambition, which have perhaps been his associates for many incarnations. When called upon to give up these things, the neophyte feels a kind of blank, before he realizes his higher possibilities. After having given up all his associations, his life itself seems to vanish into thin air. He seems to have lost all hope, and to have no object to live and work for. He sees no signs of his own future progress. All before him seems darkness, and a sort of pressure comes upon the soul, under which he begins to droop, and in most cases he begins to fall back and gives up further progress. But in the case of a man who really struggles, he will battle against that despair and be able to proceed on the path. We are each of us called upon to kill all our passions and desires, not that they are all necessarily evil in themselves, but that their influence must be annihilated before we can establish ourselves on the higher planes. exists to showcase music and ideas. I am not an expert at anything, and I have no agenda beyond fostering curiosity. The show is not monetized on any platform. It's available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and others. A video version is available on the Cryonic Mind YouTube page. If you can like, subscribe, comment, etc., it helps the show's visibility. If your music was featured here and you'd prefer it was not, let me know and I will remove it from the feed. You can reach the show at spookatorium@gmail.com. The website can be found at spookatorium.org, and your comments are always welcome. Thanks very much for spending some time here. That was Black Magnet with Neuroprofit from the 2020 release Hallucination Scene. Before that was Merrimack, a project I particularly like with worms in the divine intestine. And opening that set was Voidthrone off of their 2016 EP Spiritual War Tactics. Up next is a new project called Shadow Structure From their EP Never Say Never Again, this track is The Last Days. That was Depressor with Somnambulous, and before that, a new project from Jonathan Kennedy called Shadow Structure with the track The Last Days. That is going to bring us to the end of another episode. I did check the house for a kazoo, by the way, but I couldn't find one. You almost got a few seconds of woodfish and recorder, but perhaps another day. Thanks, as always, for tuning in. I know a few of you have been here for the past year, and that keeps me engaged with trying to put together something worth an hour of your time. I really do appreciate it. To bring it home today, this is a project that I think is grossly underappreciated. This is Teeth Engraved with the Names of the Dead, and the track is Storm Generator.